I'm Jen. I'm the kind of old autistic lady. And I had posted a short earlier today that was just a brief discussion about grief as an autistic individual. Um, I won't rehash what I said in that video, but what I do want to talk about that I think is relevant, especially for those of us who are middle-aged or older, is what it's like when a person's support system deteriorates either because of miscommunication or things that happen with our relationships with people, or if one lives long enough, people start passing away, which is sort of the gist of the earlier video. Is I had a wave of grief hit me from people that had passed long ago, over a decade ago. And that happens to me from time to time. And part of what makes it so sad for me is the cumulative loss. And it's not just, hey, I miss these people. It's like this autism diagnosis. I wish I could have discussed that, let's say, with my parents. I can imagine how they would react to it, but I don't know that for sure. And I came from a household where I was cherished. My parents very much wanted me. It was a good relationship by and large. They're, like any human relationship, it wasn't always that way, but the vast majority of the time it was. And so when you have a positive support system and then those people either exit your life through choices, decisions, and behaviors as part of one or both parties in a relationship, or due to things like passing away or, becoming very elderly or ill or sick, other disabilities that happen that make it harder for people to be in each other's lives. For me, I can't suss out if what I'm feeling is just plain outright human experience, that when one lives long enough, one tends to lose people, or if it is specifically more acute because of how I process things. I suspect it's a little bit of the latter, because I had a really hard time with this grief when all of these people initially passed away. And as I mentioned on the little reel short, I forget what you call it, YouTube short, I had my drinking really ratcheted up. That I would say that was when I became a full-fledged alcoholic, needed to get help, was when a bunch of people in my family started to pass away. And then it got worse and worse and worse. And I would have periods where I wouldn't drink, and then it would kick back in again. And the impetus for me to go to rehab and to do the whole inpatient thing and the whole intensive outpatient thing, a lot of it was because I had, my brother was really not doing well with cancer, and he ultimately ended up passing away shortly after I got out of treatment. And I didn't get to see him before he passed away, in Iowa. And it's a long story about why. Perhaps in a different video I'll talk about that a little bit. But it gave me a purpose to kind of honor him, because I didn't want to make missing rehab or missing him when he was so ill because I was in rehab. I didn't want that to be a wasted effort. I kind of, in my sobriety, I think about him a lot. And, I can't say that I was particularly close to my brother. I was born kind of late in life for my parents. So my brothers, I have 4 brothers, they were all older than I am. So I mostly did not grow up in the same house as they did at the same time. But this particular brother was the one closest in age to me, so I did live under the same roof with him for a while. But the cumulative nature of grief, when it hits me, is very seldom about missing one person. It's usually about missing a handful of people. And as I was talking about earlier today in the YouTube short, um, I when grief hits me and I'm not expecting it, which is almost always when it happens now, because I can't really schedule time to be sad. It doesn't work. Sadness doesn't come. Um, when I got out of rehab in late 2021, and I started going to just therapy, weekly therapy, I had been intellectualizing my feelings about most things, but especially about the grief, and not feeling that sadness as much in a bodily sense. And I think that understanding what we're feeling as autistic people can be a little bit more challenging. I don't know that I had full-blown alexithymia, where you can't identify the emotions you're feeling. I don't know if that was the case or not, but I knew I could talk about my feelings way easier than I could feel my feelings. And now the feeling my feelings part, more than a decade later, since my parents passed away, and it was my parents that had brought on grief earlier today. It that grief is probably a lot more intense than the grief from other people I've lost, because I know that my parents were genuinely good people and they did the best that they could in raising me. And I'm not a person that comes from a household where there was a lot of strife in my relationship with my parents, and I know that is also fairly common. But one of the things that I think makes it harder to be autistic and go through this experience, besides the whole, hey, this like screwed up my routine and my schedule for the day, which is a little bit discombobulating anyway. But in addition to that, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I don't let people in easily, because it's very easy to be misread by people at being a neurodivergent person. And so it takes a long time for that trust to build up. And I also don't have a very high bar before socializing wears me out. So when I do spend time with people and I have a handful of close friends, it wipes me out for weeks, to where socializing again is in person anyway, or even having a phone call. I truly enjoy doing it when I do it, but I get really tired afterwards. And not to say that a relationship with one person could fill the hole left by another person who's passed away or has otherwise exited someone's life, because it doesn't work like that. It's not a one for one. It's definitely one of those things where, for me, what I feel a little bit is I just feel the hole. I just feel the hole more. Could be a square hole, it could be a round hole, it could be an octagonal hole. And filling it with more relationships with people, in a certain sense, feels like it should help it even out. It doesn't, though. And the older I get, the more this grief piles up, and I have to learn how to deal with that. I'm not saying I'm good at it at all, but the point of making this longer video for me, more than anything, is just to say that if you've experienced grief, whether it's recent or quite a while ago, of losing someone, and if you are in that situation and feeling like you're having a hard time dealing with that grief, if I were to give somebody advice, it would be to either find somebody that you really trust to just talk to, or if you find a therapist that you jive with. And if those aren't possibilities for any number of reasons, I know how hard it is for me, and my hope is that people get help in the way that they need it. And when I was in the intensive outpatient from when I was in rehab. So if you've never been through the whole treatment thing, so the level of care I had when I first went in is I was inpatient for about a month. And I was like at a residential facility, slept there, was there 24/7 for just about a month. And then after that, there was a program through the same rehab center, and it was a virtual program, which was really helpful as an autistic person, believe me. But this virtual program, it met several times a week in the evening, and those outpatient programs are meant to be so that a person can work and still go, and they're very, very helpful, just to have that connection with other people who have an addiction. And I didn't find it anyway to be nearly as overwhelming as being in treatment in person and dealing with all of the disruptions that caused, just with routines and loud noises and everything. And I've shared this before. The place I went to rehab through, their specialty is music therapy. And so I clicked with the therapists in the group in ways that I probably wouldn't have otherwise, because one of my special interests is music by a particular singer, and it gave me an opportunity to sort of lose myself in some of that music and share that with other people and lose myself in other people's music, which was a really positive thing. I think that was really helpful for the grief thing too. They also have just a mental health track as well, not just an addiction track. So if anybody wants to know where that was, I can drop it in the comments. If anybody has that question, just ask. But to return to the whole outpatient thing, it wasn't, that group wasn't because of grief. Like, everybody there was in that group because they were dealing with some sort of an addiction. And it was group therapy. But one of the group therapists made a comment in that therapy that was helpful to me, that I remember every once in a while. So I want to share it, not taking credit for it. It was something that I heard from this therapist. She said that, throughout most of human history, people did not need therapy to grieve. And that in the natural course of things, grief happens in community, think of the tribe or whatever. But the ability for a human to process grief and then move on with life is one of the more resilient things that humans have a capacity for. And then, if you stop and you think about in the past, how much younger people were when they passed away, and how common it was for people to lose children to disease and childbirth and, all of those things, where death was a much more constant presence, I think. It is comforting for me to think about that every once in a while, that in the natural course of things, we have a set of, I don't know if I want to call it biological instructions or spiritual instructions or just human instructions with how we've been knitted together, that grief itself over the passing of a loved one or the loss of a relationship, there is an innate ability to process that. And I think my challenge, being autistic and perhaps also being ADHD, I don't know if I am or not, but in that neurodiversity, thinking about how if the neurotypical thing is when somebody loses a person in their life, and it's not to something overly traumatic like a war or a shooting or domestic abuse, or barring it being from something traumatic, that I kind of look at it like, if I have a big bucket and there's a line on the bucket, that would be where somebody could get over a passing, and is sort of the average, I guess you'd say, line for how to deal with grief. I feel like my line's a little higher in the bucket, like it takes a little bit more help to deal with that, because of my own history. But I think a lot of neurodivergent people have the same kind of history with loss and dealing with rejection and how to express emotion in an appropriate way around other people, in a way that's not going to cause more rejection to happen, as well as addiction issues and other mental health issues that a lot of us have. It makes me feel a little bit better that maybe when I need help with stuff like that, it's not that I need help with the whole grief bucket, it's that I need help from the difference between apparently there's some sort of gesture on my webcam that I just made. Wow. Okay, let's just change this and make it, wow. I knew there was some sort of a gesture thing with this, but okay, this was going to be a super serious video, and I might have to edit this out. Are we good? Are we good? Okay. What was I saying? Oh, so, for a lot of my life, I felt like because I was having a hard time with the passing of a lot of these people, I felt like I should just have some times where I was just really sad and then I'd be over it. And then it just would never happen that way. And I would, at times, when I wasn't thinking about what that group therapist had said, I would get really down on myself going, I can't even grieve correctly. Like, I don't even have, like, I would feel like I just didn't have the internal instructions for how to deal with it all. And that's why I, had this like defective thing of going and being an alcoholic and maladaption. And I would get in that sort of a loop, a rumination loop of turning grieving into something that I was failing at, because I feel that way a lot. The black and white thinking that happens with me, I tend to view things as I'm either doing well at it or I'm failing at it, with not a lot of in between. And I suspect there's a lot of reasons for why that is, but the one that probably is most relevant to the topic at hand of autism is I want a neat categorization of things, and when they are messy and in not an easy categorization like that, I struggle with it. And slowly over time, I am dealing with that grief. I am processing that grief, and I'm still going to a therapist for that reason, just to be outright and frank about it, because I do have a really good therapist who I think is a good therapist for me personally to have. Not every therapist works with every person. Not every type of therapy, like modality of therapy, works with everybody. And I found, I think, I got to be careful about what I do with my hands. My camera's going to get goofed up again. But anyway, my larger point, just to wrap this video up, is that I want to share my experience of what this has been like to have these sort of surprise grieving sessions every once in a blue moon over time, over a cumulative sense of grief, and to share that in a way that is clear and explicit, so that if anybody in my audience, if you have ever felt that way, or you are feeling that way, or you're afraid that someday you'll feel that way, if you haven't experienced loss yet, I want to put it out there that because I know I'm dealing with it and I'm feeling it, and it's at least one way that grief hits at least one person walking the earth, that there can be a connection with just, you don't have to feel like you're the only one going through it in that way. So it's really just meant to be an expression of, it's in my life, I'm feeling it right now, so I want to share it, not to come across like, oh, woe is me, but to share in case it helps anybody, as well as just to talk about it. Sometimes I process emotions just by talking about them and hearing my own voice and things like that. So if you have enjoyed the video or got anything out of it, like and subscribe, share, keep coming back to the channel if you're finding it helpful, and drop me a comment if there's anything about your experience with grief or loss that you either felt that you had something about the experience that was similar than mine, or if you feel like your experience is totally separate and you want to put that in a comment in order to have a forum to just feel heard. You guys probably can see I don't have a huge channel. I have bandwidth to respond to people's comments. So with all that said, thanks for watching and take care.